Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Onward. It is a fabulous Saturday morning. It is beautiful outside, sunny. I cannot wait
Yeah.
until after the show. We're going to have a great show, but I can't wait until after the show because I really want to go get my run on this morning. So, hey, thanks again for joining us. You are joining us on WCEG, WCEG Network, WCEG Talk Radio. You can catch us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, X, and of course, YouTube. WCEG stands for the Worldwide Community Empowerment Group. We speak life into the community. And always so grateful to founder Penny Rogers for all of the work that she does to support the community. And of course, all of the opinions expressed are those of the guests and the host, not of WCEG. So, again, thanks for joining us. This is going to be, I think, a very timely show, especially given what's going on in our world right now and
Yeah.
in our nation. The election is going on, and it's a great thing because it's an opportunity for a fresh start. But at the same time, there's a lot of negativity that's going around. And I think a lot of us are feeling it and really wanting the whole process to be over so that we can all move forward. And so I'm excited to have as our guest today, Joanne Fisher. Hey, Joanne.
Hey, Adrian, how are you?
I am well. Thank you for joining me this morning.
Thank you for having me.
So, Joanne, I met Joanne probably about a year ago.
Thereabout.
Um, and I met Joanne. She's an ESL instructor for a local nonprofit here in Atlanta. But in our conversations, what I found out is that Joanne has many, many talents and interests. And one of the things that Joanne is really passionate about, and it kind of slipped out a little bit, it is the whole concept of joy. Joanne is a Christian author, a joy coach, and we'll talk about that a little bit. I found that very interesting,
Sure.
but also the founder of Joy Speak. And you can find her work. She's written a book, but you can find her work on joyspeak.com. One of the things I talked about in my first show of the season is how we are making a shift with Onward. Onward used to be about how we are able to navigate and overcome the negative things, situations, and certain situations that happen in our lives. But after really talking to a lot of my friends who are over 50, I'm over 50, I realized that a lot of us have had experiences in our lives that have really kind of shifted us, shifted our outlook, shifted the expectations that we have for the remainder of our lives. And some of us are trying to figure out, how do we move onward in a positive way? How do we find light in our lives after raising kids or experiencing things that have happened before our 50 years? And so, Joy, I think,
It's
Joanne,
okay.
I keep wanting to call you Joy.
It's okay. I'm
Um,
so used to
I
it.
know. But Joanne, that's why I think that this show is so timely,
Yeah,
because of what we're going through individually,
sure.
especially as women of color over 50, but also collectively as a nation. But
Sure.
before we get to that, I want to talk a little bit about you. Have you share your journey and how joy became such an integral part of your life?
Sure. Thanks, Adrian. Well, to your point about the chatter that's going on in the world right now, not just in the United States, but really all around the world. The chatter has been so negative,
Right.
and that weighs on our psyche
Yeah.
way more than I think we realize.
Right.
And so I'm a person who grew up in the Caribbean, in the beautiful islands of two islands, Antigua and St. Thomas.
Yes.
And if you know anything about the islands, they're full of sunshine and brightness and, positivity in terms of, the weather and all of that.
Right.
Um, and so growing up there for me uh, was wonderful because it helped me establish this character trait, number one, that I feel that I was initially blessed with by God, and it was just it fermented and manifested into the person that I am today, because of many factors: my upbringing, my relationship with God, my relationship with my family. And so this trait of mine, being joyful, being positive, being happy, is something that I just naturally am. I know that not everyone is like that. We
Right.
all have different personas, but this is me. And
Right.
it's so much me that there were people in my life, in my early 20s who who didn't believe it was, they thought I was fake. Let me put it that way.
Okay.
They thought I was fake because they didn't believe it was possible that I could maintain this level of joy and happiness and all of that all the time.
Right.
And, that was in my 20s.
And and
Um,
and so, it's kind of interesting that you say that because I do think in our society that when people see others who experience a high level of joy in their lives, and I do want you to talk a little bit about the difference between joy and happiness,
mhm.
but people do tend to wonder, are you just oblivious to the negative things that are going on in your life? Are you just trying to um, act like it doesn't exist? And so, it's almost like we train ourselves to kind of fall into the negativity that surrounds us, the
Sure.
darkness that surrounds us, rather than um, kind of showing that light that's within us. Talk a
Mhm.
little bit about the difference between joy and happiness, and then talk a little bit about how that joy manifested itself even when you experienced crisis in your life.
Sure. Well, first, let me say, I think that a lot of people think that joy is elusive. They
Mm,
think that it's a quality that it's it's not accessible to them if their circumstances don't dictate that they should behave in a joyful way.
right, right.
And for me, I think the absolute opposite. Joy is not elusive. It's a quality that's accessible to any person who seeks it.
Yes,
But that's an
yes.
important part. The important part is seeking it. And as we were talking about my upbringing, me growing up as a very joyful person, I just, I feel like, let me give you a little, a framework, okay? I grew up picking cotton
Mm,
in the Caribbean. Um, I grew up in a small community um, in Antigua. And I mean, I was very, very young when I picked cotton. So I don't want to make it seem like, I did it for years. Okay. It was
right.
probably maybe, I don't really even remember, about maybe 6 months to a year.
Okay.
I just remember I did it because my
Right,
grandmother did it and
right,
I was with her,
right.
and so, um, to that point, that relationship with my grandmother
Mm,
never made me feel as though picking cotton was something I should be ashamed of. She picked cotton.
Right.
She cleaned people's houses. I went with
Hmm.
her to do all of that. And somehow, even under those circumstances, if I think about what my life was back then,
Right.
it could be easy for me to be like, well, this was my life and it was terrible. But that's
Right.
not how I saw it. What
Right.
I saw was an amazing woman who was willing to do whatever she needed to do for her family. And so for me, I was grateful. My grandmother was 50 years old when I came to live with her. Speaking of over 50,
Right.
okay. She was 50 years old. I was a baby. And it's easy to look at your situation and your
Right.
circumstance and compare it to other people's situations, other people's circumstances. And in that comparison, you you consider if you consider their circumstances better than yours, then
Right.
guess what happens to you? You become
Right.
ungrateful for the
Right.
circumstances that you are in. All of a sudden, your circumstances seem less. And then what happens? You don't give yourself the opportunity to be joyful. Now, the difference to me between being joyful and being happy
Yes.
is gratitude.
Oh, yeah. I was just, and it's funny you say that because that's what stood out in your conversation was that attitude of gratefulness.
Yes, gratitude to me is that difference. And I don't mean, being grateful means that you have to like set aside any kind of, maybe you had previous prejudices
Right.
or, misunderstandings or beliefs, right?
Right.
That having this much money or this much family or whatever, like it doesn't mean setting aside those things, but it means recognizing those things and then being willing to grow
Yes.
despite whatever your previous belief was. Okay. So sometimes people will ask you, and I'm sure this has happened to you, Adrian. People say, how are you doing? Are you happy? Are you
Right.
happy? And many people will respond to that question based on their current circumstance
Situation. Right.
and their current
Absolutely.
situation.
Yes.
But if you ask someone if they're joyful, a person who can answer yes to that is a person who says, hmm, I know my circumstances aren't great, but I am grateful for the circumstances that I have because there are other
Exactly.
people whose circumstances are worse than mine. So guess what? Despite all of that, I find a way to bring a certain level of joy to my life. Um, I think, Adrienne, a big part of that gratitude that leads to joy is what we say to ourselves, what we
Absolutely.
allow to
Absolutely.
occupy
Our mind.
our minds and then come out
Yes.
of our mouths,
I
right?
agree with you. And I like how you started out with for many people, joy seems elusive,
Yeah,
which leads me to think that this whole attitude of joy tied to gratitude is actually very intentional.
absolutely.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Because sometimes we feel that joy will magically appear in our lives, but it doesn't. And you talked about seeking joy.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about how that looks to intentionally seek joy.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you mentioned that because I actually have a TikTok channel, right? And the TikTok
Ah,
channel is Joy Speak.
okay.
And you have to put your little bio there. And under my bio, I say seeking, speaking, spreading joy.
I
That's what I
love
have under
that.
my
Say
bio.
say
Seeking,
that
speaking,
again, Joanne.
seeking, speaking, and
Yes.
spreading joy. So let's start with the seeking part,
Seeking, yes.
right? Um, the seeking is looking for those things that bring this peace to your to your heart and to your mind.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
You have to look for that.
You really do.
You do. In today's environment, you have to look for
Yes,
that. To answer your question from earlier with regards to how Joy Speak even began, it was because there was so much, I can't take too much negativity.
right.
I can't do it. It just, to me, I think you have, I wrote this poem once. Um, Wait, did I write it or did I just read it? I think I might have just read it. I write a lot of poetry, so I got lost on which one that was. But um, there was this poem that I read once. I'll send you a video of it, but the poem talked about how there are these two different wolves,
Okay.
right? Or dogs or wolves.
Okay.
And they're both starving at first, right? That means they're on equal ground, right?
Mm.
And then one gets fed and the other doesn't.
Hmm.
Well, which one is going to be stronger? The one who gets fed or the one who's not fed?
Right. The one who gets fed.
The one that gets fed. It's the same thing with our internal psyche,
Yes.
right? What are we feeding our minds?
Right.
If you feed your mind negativity, guess what? You're going to grow as a negative person.
Right.
If you feed your mind, I'm going to say this in a couple of ways, positivity, but it's not just positivity. It
Right.
is if you feed your mind um, uh, information that leads to joy,
Yes.
then you'll get to joy. But if you
Absolutely.
feed your mind information that leads to a negative outlook on life,
Yes.
then that's what's going to happen. To your point at the top of the hour about what's happening in our country right
Yeah.
now, right? One would think that we are going to hell in a handbasket the way that our
Right.
country has been described.
Described exactly. That's right.
So, in so many ways. And if you don't find yourself a way to look beyond what other people dictate to you you should think, and rather access information that
Right.
feeds the joy in your life, then you are going to end up not being a seeker of joy. You have to
Right.
seek it. You have to look for it. You have to go after it. Um, because those with the biggest microphones will tell
Yes.
you, what you should think, and that's not going to be beneficial to you if joy is an important part of your
And so
life
what
or
I'm
you want
also
it to be.
hearing you say is in seeking joy, it's seeking positive messages,
I'm gonna drink my tea if you
yes,
don't mind.
positive affirmations, positive opportunities, situations, things that, and I love the word that you said, peace, because
Yeah.
that's another thing that's tied to joy as well.
Yes.
Gratitude and a sense of peace, because it's being able to go through any situation, but to still have gratitude
Yeah.
because you see that there's something positive in this situation that you're going through.
Yeah.
And choosing to not follow the voices of those who are constantly negative.
Yeah.
And that means your own voice too.
Yeah. Um, if it's not something that you're used to doing, I want people to know that that's okay
Yeah.
because it's possible to learn it.
Yes, absolutely.
It's possible to learn it. Um, I don't know if you know this, Adrian, but I wrote what I called um, uh, I'm sorry,
Okay.
my brain just did an over 50 thing.
It's okay. That's why we're here.
Um, a dream catcher journal.
What is a dream catcher journal?
The Dreamcatcher journal um, is it's just a simple journal that allows us the opportunity to um, create habits that
Mm,
lead to the things that we want to see in our lives, right? Um,
yes.
the Dreamcatcher Journal, it's on Amazon. It's called Black Woman Rising. And it is in that journal, it talks about that it takes 21 days to create a habit, right? And 90 days to create a lifestyle. And
Oh,
um, so for those who think, I'm just not this happy-go-lucky person, nobody's asking you to change your your outward face to the world, right? This is where the whole fake
right,
thing comes in.
right,
Like nobody's asking you to be fake, right? However, what
right. You
if
can
you
still be yourself.
exactly, exactly. You can still be yourself. You don't always have to be this. This is me. This is who I am.
Right,
But
exactly.
this is not my husband. However, my
Right.
husband can be joyful, right?
Yes.
Um,
But it
and
doesn't
so
show itself in the same way.
it doesn't show itself in the same way. And so, but so the outward may look different,
Right.
okay? But what I want people to know is that the inward, the core,
Yes.
right,
Yes.
can be molded. The
Right.
core can be shaped and changed if you give yourself the opportunity to do that, if you give
Yes.
yourself the opportunity to grow and to change. Um, so I think that if with the Dreamcatcher Journal, I wanted to give women, Black women,
Yes.
but the book can be used by anybody, really, to be honest with you. The opportunity to say, I have a dream, I have something that I want to accomplish in life, I have a goal, something that I want to do,
Yes.
and it just gives them the opportunity um, to pursue a 21-day habit that could lead to a 90-day uh, growth and change opportunity that then leads to a lifestyle change. So with that premise, joy, you have to be intentional about it.
Yes,
That's a way
exactly.
to be intentional about it.
So
It's to
seeking
say,
joy.
okay,
Yes,
today I will seek information that uplifts my spirit.
exactly.
Day two,
Exactly.
I will seek information that uplifts my spirit. Day three,
Right.
and you keep going and going and going until you develop this habit. You talked about being a joy coach, and to be honest with you, I'd taken some courses. It gave me that title,
Right.
right? It gave me that title, and I haven't actually like gone out to coach, and I have done I have with some of my friends, right? People who know me or who have known me since like high school or whatever,
Yes.
and they're like, "Trainer, you're still the same way," right? And so I've kind of helped people in that way, um, but if I'm to coach anyone right now, it's to say you have to be intentional about anything that you want to achieve, anything that you want to see
I
happen in your life.
I so agree with you, Joanne, because so many times we talk about all the positive things we want to happen in our lives. Whether it's material things or spiritual things,
Hmm.
but then we sit and we
Hmm.
wait
Yeah,
and we wonder why these things are not being manifested in our lives.
yeah,
And it's because, seeking can be hard.
yes,
Especially to your point about being constantly surrounded by negativity,
yeah,
which can come from the broader environment, but it can also come from people who are close to us.
100%.
Many people live in a household where they're surrounded by negativity. And so sometimes it's really hard to escape that
Yeah,
when you're coming home and what is being spoken to you or not spoken creates an atmosphere that is very draining, emotionally, or even can be physically difficult. Especially, I've been in the DV space for a while, homelessness space. And a lot of times, what you see with people in crisis is not so much a lack of the material, but it's a lack of positive support.
Sure. Just to speak to that point, I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to
Yeah.
turn interviewer for a second. In that space, right?
Yeah.
Had you ever encountered anyone who was there, but they were still joyful? They still had a positive outlook.
Yeah. And so, to that point, that's really, I think, the thing that you have to work on the most, because you will find by the time people are seeking help in a crisis situation, a lot of them are not joyful because they've
Sure.
exhausted
Yes.
relationships, right?
Yes.
Exhausted family, exhausted friends, exhausted any other
Yes.
opportunity to move
Yes.
forward. And so
Yes.
by the time we see them, that joy sometimes is really absent.
Yeah.
But to your point, there are people who are still hopeful. And so with joy, we talked about peace,
Yes.
intention, gratitude. With joy also comes hope,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Because you believe that there is something better for you,
Yes.
that you will have that feeling again, that it will be a part of who you are again.
Yes.
And to your point too, I have found that people that have that hope are ones that tend to be successful in overcoming their situations.
Yeah. And that's what I wanted to share. I'm glad you said that because that is exactly the direction I was headed, which is we just talked about how joy presents itself in different ways in people.
Yes.
For me, oftentimes it's very external. You can see it on my face, but at the same time, for other people, it presents itself differently. And
Yes.
one way that joy presents itself is in the idea of hope, that it's not
Yes.
finished yet. I'm not
Yes.
finished yet. I'm not done yet. God isn't done with me yet.
Right.
There is a light, albeit ever so dim. There's
Yes.
enough there to
Exactly.
keep me hanging on and keep me moving towards the help that I need. And I just want to say, with regards to that, is that sometimes it is hard for people to access joy
It is.
alone. So
Right.
they have to pursue assistance, right? They
Right.
have to ask for help. And that's what you encountered in the space that you were in, is people coming and saying, I need help. But that's them trying to get back to that joy in their life, and or what may have at one point been in their life, right? And right now in our country, because of all the negative chatter,
Right.
because of all of the negativity that has, it's like this cloud, okay, that's over us that we're trying to get through.
Yes.
Many people need the help of a professional
Yeah.
therapist or psychologist to help them access a side of their spirit, a side of their mind, a side of their brain that, um, as we said at the top of the hour, appears elusive, you know?
I agree with you. And I think to your point, one of the things that happens, and I might get a little bit of criticism for this, but I do think, speaking specifically to African American women, we are brought up to be very strong, and in that strength, sometimes we do not seek help, outside of our natural relationships,
Yeah,
because sometimes it can be seen as a sign of weakness.
yeah,
Um, but it is okay
yeah,
to seek that support, because we can't handle it alone.
yeah,
And sometimes the relationships that we have, family, friends, are really not that supportive.
Yeah.
They really kind of keep us in that negative mindset. And so I
Well,
agree with you.
I have to say, I've been very blessed in that area because I have an aunt who has been a therapist for over, 40, 45 years. And whenever I find myself marching towards a space mentally that
Yeah.
I know is unhealthy,
Yes.
I have access,
Right.
right? But I also know that not everyone has that.
Exactly.
I'm sorry.
Exactly.
Let me rephrase. Not everyone has that in their family.
Right. Or just access in general,
Or access in
which is a
general.
whole another challenge. Um,
Yeah.
but I do want to move on to speaking joy
Yes. Yes.
into
Yes.
your life, because not only do we need to seek it, but we need to speak it because we can be our biggest enemies when it
Yes.
comes to sustaining joy.
Yeah. So, Joy Speak started as an opportunity for me to showcase something that I enjoy wholeheartedly, which is poetry, right?
Okay.
And so the idea was to be able to create a space for poets to come and deliver material of a positive nature. I used to
Yeah.
have these open mic nights. I did them at the Georgia World Congress Center downtown, and in different venues, right? And I loved it. It was a chance for people to come. People would come, they would sing, they would perform poetry, and that's how Joy Speak came to be because it
Very
was all
cool.
about speaking
Yes.
joy, right? And over the years, that kind of evolved into what is now my website, joyspeak.com, which is a blogging website. I did podcasts. I had an opportunity to interview all kinds of people on my podcast, which I do plan to relaunch at the top of the year, in January of 2025. Um, I would love to have you as a guest as well.
Thank you.
Um, and the purpose for that, the reason I did that was because the Bible talks about faith comes from hearing, and hearing comes from the
Mm-hmm.
word of God, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there are lots of open mic nights, open mic opportunities out there, and people are free to express themselves in any way that they want, right? But I wanted mine to focus on faith building, joy building,
Yes.
mental positivity building. And so
Right.
that's where Joy Speak came from because I thought, you know what? Our words matter.
Yes.
Words matter. It matters what we say to ourselves, and it matters what we say to other
To
people,
others. Yeah. So
even people we disagree with,
well, we're
by the
going,
way.
and I really want to talk about that when we get to the spreading, because I think that's just as important. But with the speaking, talk a little bit about how do we speak to ourselves,
Yeah,
and some of the recommendations that or suggestions that you have, because that has to be again intentional.
yeah. Um, I'm gonna uh touch on something that, I hope people are willing to embrace, which is if you speak negatively to yourself,
Yes.
you're your own worst enemy.
Yes.
Um, and if you desire to have a positive outlook, then the first person who has to speak positively to to you is going to be you.
Right.
I don't mean an egotistical, pompous, arrogant speech.
Right.
Okay. It's important that if you're going to grow as a human being, it's important that you're able to look at yourself critically. And
Yeah.
even when others bring information to you that may criticize you, you've got to be at least open to hearing
Yes.
and then going back and uh, processing the
Right.
information and then drawing your own conclusion.
I agree.
That being said, though, the first person that needs to speak positively to you is you.
Right.
I've seen TikToks and other videos where it's cutesy with young people. Um, you have a parent and you have a young child, and it's cutesy, but to me, it's more than cutesy. And it's where you have a father and a daughter, or a mother and a son, or mother, daughter, whatever, and the mother is giving an affirmation to the child, or the father is giving an affirmation to the child, and the child is just repeating it. Or you sometimes see videos where the child will be, I am beautiful, I am great,
Yes.
I am awesome, I am smart. Now, some people can look at that and, like I said, think that it's just cutesy. Oh, isn't that
Right.
sweet? Oh, isn't that cute? But I dare say that that parent is preparing that child to weather storms that are gonna come no matter what.
I
Life storms,
I
it
agree.
doesn't just, it's not like, the Holy Spirit back in the
Right.
days of the Israelites
Right.
going on the doors with, the signs. It hits everybody
I
equally.
I agree. And speaking about that as children, what tends to happen, and I think getting back to those of us who are over 50, we begin to hear so much negativity about ourselves,
Yeah,
whether it's in the workplace,
yeah,
whether it's in the community, we sometimes friends, sometimes family, we begin to absorb that negativity and we begin to see that in ourselves. And it's things that aren't really true. It's what people perceive. And so how do we, those of us who are older, start to turn around negative perceptions of ourselves? Um, Sometimes criticisms are things that we should listen to and perhaps take into account as we're changing and growing, but that's not who we are.
yeah. So I was probably around, uh, I'm, I want to say maybe my late 40s or so, heading towards 50 or somewhere. Yeah, 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 yeah. I was just around, yeah, right in that area when someone that I was someone that is a close part of my family said some things to me that when I say took me out, it took me
Mm,
out.
mm,
Okay. Um, I was right on the verge of moving forward with all things joy.
yes.
And right at that moment, that person said some things to me that it was unfair, it was brutal,
Sure.
it was emotionally, spiritually, mentally debilitating
Mm,
for me. And it took a long time, even with an aunt therapist, for me to turn the page on that criticism.
wow.
There is a there is a nugget, an element of truth in in usually in the way that people that you're close to criticize you.
Yes.
They may not always be completely
Right.
fair.
Exactly. But
They
there
may go
is a
ballistic,
kernel. Right.
but there is a kernel of truth. And I took that kernel of truth. It was brutal. but there was like an element, like 2 or 3 words
Right.
that I took and made those 2 or 3 words made the entire thing
Yes.
become like my poster board,
Right.
right? And it was like I would get up and feel all of those words coming at me every day,
Right.
despite the unfairness of them and despite the lack of truth and so forth, and
Right.
despite all the people telling me, oh, this, that, and the other, not true, not true, not true. When it's someone though that you love, that should love you,
Yes.
that should be speaking nothing but positivity into your life, delivering that kind of message, it's hard to get around that.
Right.
And even
Right.
for Joanne, it was hard. It was hard for me to speak my way through um, that darkness, because that's what it was. It was a period of darkness for me, and it was hard for me to speak my way through that darkness on my own.
So
It took a
how did you navigate that? How did you begin to speak positivity into your life and realize that that little kernel isn't all of Joanne?
the first part was to overcome my grief
Mm,
because I began grieving that relationship uh, as though it was as though it was dead, for lack of a better way to say it.
sure.
And I had to go through the 5 stages of grief, right?
Right.
I literally, the first stage is denial, right?
Right.
So this person had sent me an email. That's how, okay. I, when you hear double take, I was like, wait, huh? I
Right.
couldn't, I was like, wait, what? This gotta be a joke. First stage of denial. And then when I realized it wasn't, then I had to go through all the other stages, right? Um, I think once I got to the final stage of acceptance, which what I had to accept was that not only does this person not truly know me,
Right.
but if I am going to move forward, I have to let them, I have to let them get to know me,
Right. And at the
which
same time,
requires forgiveness.
forgive. So that's a whole nother thing. And I love that you're touching on these words that are associated with joy, right? Because part of joy is forgiveness.
Yes.
You cannot have joy in your life and have a heart of unforgiveness.
There is no way. It's
Right.
just not possible.
Right.
And that made me angry because I didn't want to forgive at first.
And so is that part of you speaking to yourself as saying,
Yes.
these are the things that need to be in order for me to have joy?
Yes. And it wasn't just that. It wasn't just me speaking to myself. It was
Yes.
being open to what God was speaking to me.
And
Because that I
yes,
wanted to shut him out. Not today.
I think that's really important, Joanne, to mention that because as people of faith, we seek not only to make sure that we're speaking positivity into ourselves and also, getting those messages externally, but it's also quieting ourselves
Yeah.
because the chatter that exists around us is so loud
Yeah.
that we often don't quiet ourselves to have God speak to us, which He does anyway, but
Yeah.
really for us to hear it.
Yeah. And thankfully, I also had people around me who mutually were involved in this relationship who were able to, help me understand uh, maybe why, that individual chose that moment
Right.
to speak that way towards me
Yes.
and help me figure out how to speak differently to myself,
Yeah, and I think um
to pop that corn,
yeah, I think that's the thing is
that
you have
kernel.
to learn how to, and you talked about learning, right? This is a
Yeah,
process. The whole
yeah,
thing of joy is a process. It's how do you undo all that has been done, especially as we get older. It's a willingness to say, and I hear a lot of people say this, well, I'm just this way. I am who I am, you know. And it's a willingness, like you said, to have an open mind to say, you know what, you are who you are, but there are some things that if you really want joy in your life, you got to do it a little differently.
yeah.
So
Um,
I love that.
I fortunately, for 54 of the 56 years of my life, had a wonderful sister,
Mm.
beautiful, awesome, amazing sister. But what made her so amazing was her wisdom and her
Mm.
discernment.
Yes.
Um, and I think that what discernment does is that it reminds you to be grateful for everything that is good and
Yes.
beneficial to you.
Yes.
And when you're grateful, um, you recognize the things that, you know, you need to let go of.
Oh.
And when you're able to let go, it leads to joy.
And so before, yeah, and so before we get to spreading, I really want to just touch on that for a moment, and that's the letting go piece.
Yeah.
So my sister and I are kind of addicted to that show Hoarders, right?
Okay.
And
Yeah.
and really it's less about the hoarding of material things and it's really about the mental hoarding because
Yeah.
that's where it starts. It's the inability to let go of things that have impacted you negatively.
Yeah.
And so, like material hoarding, you have all these things around you that all of the sudden spoil, smell, become moldy, attract all kinds of bugs and what have you. And a house that's beautiful all of a sudden becomes unfit to live in. And that's your mind. Not letting go of hurts and trauma begins to kind of crowd out any opportunity for positivity that can reside there.
Yeah. Yeah. I had an example of a hoarder in my life at one point,
Mm.
and it was a good lesson for me to be around that. It was a good lesson for me because it let me know I never want to do that.
Right, exactly. And it just it reminds you that you can be of a person who looks normal on the outside. There are a lot of hoarders who, when they walk outside of their homes, you would never know. It's the same with
Absolutely.
mental hoarding of
That's exactly
negativity.
right.
When you look at them, you don't suspect it.
Yeah.
But when they begin to speak, that's when you know. It's like
Yeah.
a hoarder. When you go into their home, then you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, this goes back to, what we talked about with regards to the mental health crisis that's going on right now. And, I think that just like with physical hoarding, you have to be willing um, to see the problem.
Yes.
It's the same thing
Yes.
with mental health. And let me say this. I had an opportunity a long time ago at the church that I was in to there were people who individuals who really struggled um, with addiction,
Yeah.
right? And I was able to be like a sponsor
Hmm.
for individuals who were struggling with addiction.
Right.
And so I would go to meetings and stuff like that with them. And you know what I learned?
What?
I learned I'm no different than any of these people.
Exactly.
I am no different. My
Right.
addiction could be, and what I learned about myself was my addiction for me was procrastination.
Right.
That is no different.
And
You
to your
in terms of needing to change, like what you need to do to your mind
exactly.
to
It is
change.
so easy for us to see others who have challenges that are very outward
Yeah,
and to be very critical, but to not work on our own challenges.
yeah.
And so I want to then speak, I want to transition because goodness, we only have 8 minutes left. Um,
Oh,
I
wow.
want to speak to spreading joy. Um, because we talked about seeking, we talked about speaking, but let's
Yeah,
really talk about spreading. And I want to build on what you're talking about, people with addictions and things of that nature, because a lot of times, once we feel that we have joy, we're
yeah,
good.
yeah,
You know, I'm good.
yeah,
What's going on with you is on you. But talk about the importance of spreading joy.
yeah. Well, the first part of that I want to say is that nothing that I do with regards to joy and sharing with people and just wanting to encourage people, none of that happens without the foundation of my relationship with God. Like
Yes,
none of that happens without that,
right.
right? Because I'm not I've learned enough about myself to know that I'm a selfish human being
Mm,
innately, right?
mm.
But God calls me to something different and to something better. And I want he has put this inside of me to want to give to people. But even if I was just a joyful person in general, saying that I want to take that and help other people access it is another thing altogether. And so that's why I say none of that happens without the foundation of my relationship with God.
Right,
So,
absolutely.
so with that said, that foundation comes because I'm a strong believer in the Bible and in the Word of God and its ability to change us from the inside. And I in the messages that I give, on my blog, I don't know if you want to talk about this now, but on my blog, I have an article where I talk about the five
I,
foundations you need.
yes, let's touch on those, please.
Yeah, the five foundations you need to maintain vibrant joy. Now, mind you, you'll notice once you go to the website, it says vibrant joy
Right.
because you can
I
have,
love that. I saw
yeah,
that. Yes.
you can have dim joy. You can have, a little joy, but vibrant joy
Yeah,
requires,
it's vibrant joy.
yeah, yeah, it requires access to to each foundation, right? And so the first one I talk about paying attention to what you consume.
Hmm.
And so, as we have talked about this whole hour, if you consume negativity, if you consume anger and vitriol and hatred,
Yes.
then guess what? Ain't no vibrant joy coming your way,
Right.
much less
Absolutely
dim
not.
joy. Right? Um, the next foundation is paying attention to the company you keep. And I want to sit here for a
Absolutely.
quick second, which is there is the whole saying, birds of a feather flock
What
together.
together? Yes.
But do you know that there are times when a bird will leave the flock? If if you are headed in the wrong direction, I'm
Right.
not flying with you.
Right. That's
You've
right.
got to be willing to know who you're flying
I
with.
with. I love that. I love
right?
it.
And so you've got to pay attention to the company you keep. You also have to pay attention to your gratitude level, which I think that we've talked about here quite a bit. Because again, if you're not grateful and if you're not willing to be grateful, then it will become that much harder for you to be able to access joy.
Absolutely.
Pay attention to your smile. A lot of people don't
Mm.
recognize how much their face
Yes,
speaks to their access to the world and
I
people's
so agree
willingness
with
to
you.
communicate with you.
That is a very good point, Joanne, because so many times people read you
Yes,
based on your expression.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. There are days where I'm not, look, I don't want people to think that I walk around like this because I don't. Adrian, you have seen me in less than, you know, um, and so I don't walk around like that. But you know what I'm very careful to do? And this is intentional for me.
Yes.
Anytime I go to any place where I I am being served by someone
Yeah.
else,
Yes.
I
I
smile.
agree. Yes.
And I don't only smile with my face, I also smile with my words, which is the last foundation. Pay attention to your words. I
Yes.
walk into a place where somebody has to serve me. Good afternoon. Hi, how are you? Um, because I want them to know that I'm coming to them regardless of how they are to me. I want them to
Right.
know that I am
Right.
coming to them from a place of positivity.
Exactly.
Smiling when you're on the phone when someone can't see you, it does magic to your voice, right?
Absolutely.
And so so those are the five foundations that I wanted to just kind of mention. And because of those five foundations, it makes it easier for me to actually spread joy because people recognize that the words that are coming out of my mouth match the action happening on my face.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This has been such a great conversation. I'm being told that we probably have just a minute left
Crazy.
because it's gone by so fast. I'm so grateful to you, Joanne, for sharing this. And I think there are so many nuggets. Once again, can you just share with us your website, your TikTok, all of that so folks can follow you?
Sure. The website is joyspeak.com, JoySpeak.com. TikTok is also JoySpeak. Instagram is JoySpeakJoy. And please be patient with me because I am in the process of rebuilding the website and I'm going to be getting my podcast up and moving again. So I'll start accessing the people who are going to be coming on my podcast and radio show and all of that. So I really hope people do come and are able to enjoy uh, what I have to give them and that it helps them in some way find the joy that they're searching for.
Great. Thanks again, Joanne. I appreciate you. Again, you've been listening to Onward on WCEG Network and at WCEG Talk Radio. Have a great afternoon. And as I always close, gotta run.
Thanks, Adrian.
Thank you, Joanne.